Good morning, dear audience and ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I welcome all of you to the 13th episode of the webinar. Our today's webinar is especially important because we have invited three eminent scholars from United States of America and Bangladesh who are going to shed different lights on the geopolitical realities of the Rohingya crisis and its possible resolution. Just to start, as a tradition, let me recognize that Conflict and Resilience Research Institute of Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past. We dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnerships with indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. As promised, just to set the context, dear audience, Conflict and Resilience Research Institute embarked into Rohingya crisis research in January 2018 as nearly 750,000 of them gradually started settling in Bangladesh after being forcibly displaced from the Rakhine state of Myanmar. One of the aims of CRRIC's research objectives was to analyze the conflict from stakeholders' perspective, explore macro level factors that perpetuated the conflict, and suggesting peace building avenues for the transformation of the conflict. Lexington Books published our research and it is available on various platforms. For our audience, a brief historical review of the crisis and the ethnocultural group Rohingyas might be pertinent here. Since the early Middle Ages, historians noted a host of ethnocultural and religious groups inhabited the western part of now Myanmar. And among them, the Muslims have lived in the area since as early as 12th century. The inhabitants of Rohang, which is the early Muslim name of Arakan, is accepted as the root of the current identity formation of the Rohingyas. Also, from this period till the recent past, western part of the Myanmar used to be known as Arakan, which has a cultural significance not only to Rohingyas but also for the Buddhists living in the area. In the middle of the past millennia, Mughals' influence was everywhere in Arakan, especially when it was known as an independent kingdom ruled by the kings. Historians definitely found the presence of Muslims in the Arakan court, in the king's army, as cultural representatives and administrators. Famously known poet Alol and his Padmavati bear the testimony of such a fact. When British colonial army invaded Arakan and the then Burma, it had to be three wars before this part of the world was subdued. The first Anglo-Burman war took place in 1823 and 24, and it is significant because of the 1982 Myanmar citizenship law, which essentially made the Rohingyas stateless and had set this as the cutout date to become a Myanmar citizen. During the whole British rule from 1823 to 1948, on numerous censuses that British administrators carried out in the area, nowhere they mentioned the word Rohingyas. Instead, they mentioned Arakanese Muslims or Mohammedans, follower of Prophet Muhammad. Although close to the end of 18th century, we come to know from a Scottish doctor who was also a linguist that the language Rohingya was being used by the people of the area. During the British rule, transmigration in this area spiked as hundreds were settled from various parts of the British Raj. Here lies the discord in their identity, as the ethnonym Rohingya was only popularized after the independence of Burma in 1948. We have tracked so far six major exodus that took place in the past millennia where Rohingyas were subjected to persecution. Since 1962, the military takeover of General Ne Win, a state-directed persecution befell onto them. In one count, 23 military-led clearing operations took place in the Arakan area up till 2010. In each such operations, hundreds of thousands of Rohingyas were expelled. From Bangladesh perspective, it hosts Rohingyas since 1978. As subsequent forcible expulsions took place in 1993, and a steady flow of Rohingyas continued to come in from 2012 riot onwards, it now hosts the largest number of displaced Rohingyas in the world. Since August 2017, They live in 34 camps in southeastern part of Bangladesh, one of which is the largest refugee camps in the world. Bangladesh government, like other international actors, are very keen about repatriation of all of them, yet not one Rohingya has gone back to Rakhine after 2017. As of now, observers don't see any possibility of repatriation. In the meantime, northern part of Rakhine, where most of the Rohingyas used to live, has seen intense military confrontation between the Arakan army and the Tatmadaw, or the Myanmar military. As we speak, most of the part of the northern Rakhine state is still under blackout. Since June 2020, CRRIC has organized a series of webinars on COVID-19 and contemporary geopolitical issues, and three webinars were held on Rohingya crisis as well. We have invited Rohingya diaspora members as well as activists, scholars, camp administrators in Bangladesh to dialogue about the issue. Our today's effort is directed towards understanding some of the macro level factors of the crisis and discuss intervention measures to resolve it. This is doubly important on the eve of International Court of Justice's monumental verdict of war crime and genocide against Myanmar. Needless to say, we also find deep involvement of China, India, and Japan in this part of Rakhine, while various economic adventures that includes largest Chinese Belt and Road Initiative projects are underway. In our last Rohingya crisis webinar, Dr. Mazhar commented that without resolving macro level issues, nothing can be achieved towards the sustainable resolution of the crisis. Although we see some advancement in the accountability aspect of the crisis, yet nothing has been done in terms of protection. Hundreds of Rohingyas are still undertaking a perilous journey by sea to escape refugee living condition in Bangladesh. As far as burden sharing is concerned, we find Bangladesh is bearing the most of it. We also recall a seminar that was held in Dhaka University in April 2018, out of which Dhaka Declaration on Rohingya Crisis and Towards Sustainable Resolution was published. Particularly, paragraph 4 and 7 are worth mentionable here, and it speaks about responsibility to protect R2P and recognizing the Rohingyas have a right to return to their homeland. So, in the end, as international community's attention is dwindling on Rohingyas in each passing day, we aspire to keep the dialogue open and seek expert opinion on crisis resolution. So, without further ado, let me introduce our esteemed panelists today. And first is Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed from Bangladesh. And welcome, Dr. Imtiaz. And we are very proud to have him amongst us. He is also a director of Center for Genocide Studies. And he has a lot of interest in political theories, theories of international relations, South Asian politics, religion, and culture. And he is, I mean, we have a Canadian connection with Dr. Imtiaz because he received his PhD from Curtin University in 1991. He has held a number of fellowships. Top of the list, or the recent one, we see he was the Ford Foundation Fellow at Oxford Center for Islamic Studies at the University of Oxford in 2004 and 5, Asia Fellow at the Center of Study of Development Societies, Delhi. And he has received a number of awards and scholarship, including SSRC Award on International Conflict Zones, Distinguished Leadership Award, Honorary Citizenship, the state of Maryland, USA. And he's teaching in Dhaka University in the international relations subjects since 1999. And he has a number of professional involvement as well as an editor with the Journal of International Relations of University of Dhaka, co-editor of Development of Social Science Research. And of course, he has undertaken a number of projects in the past. For example, expert on governance and legal structure. He was the team leader of mainstreaming the Rohingya refugee issue, Canadian International Development Agency, CEDA. And his particular involvement in today's webinar is very significant because he is following the crisis since the beginning, as I just mentioned, since 2018. And we move to next to welcome Dr. Professor Ali Riaz, and he's a distinguished professor at the Department of Politics and Government. He also holds the inaugural Thomas E. Eimermann Professorship from 2018 to 2020. He was the department chair between August 2007 and June 2017. In recognition of his national and international reputation as an expert on South Asian politics and political Islam, Riaz was designated university professor at Illinois State University in 2012, and he held designation until 2018. Professor Riaz joined us Illinois State University in 2002. He also worked as a British Broadcasting Corporation journalist and producer, and he published numerous books and journal articles. It's a very long list, dear audience. I'll just name a couple of them. For example, Lived Islam and Islamism in Bangladesh, Undying Issues, Critical Debates about Contemporary Challenges, Bangladeshi Political History Since Independence. And Professor Ali Riaz also earned the College of Arts and Science First Dean's Awards for Outstanding Scholarly Achievement in 2004. And finally, our last panelist, Professor A.K. Mazharul Islam. He is a professor of anthropology at Shah Jalal University of Science and Technology, Bangladesh, and also the executive director of Institute of Applied Anthropology. He was educated in Dhaka University, Minnesota State University, and Johns Hopkins University in the States. He has been a chair of anthropology department of Shah Jalal University of Science and Technology for the last 12 years. He has been teaching in 5 universities in Bangladesh, Thailand, and the US. He worked as a principal and co-principal investigator in a good number of national and international projects funded and administered by UNICEF, Save the Children, Johns Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health, Government of Bangladesh, UNDP, BRAC, and ICDDRB. He published more than 35 articles in national and international journals. So, dear audience, you have a fair bit of idea about the capabilities of our today's panelists. So, without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Imtiaz, who has tuned in from Bangladesh to have his part of today's webinar. Dr. Imtiaz, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kausar, for giving me this opportunity. As you have pointed out, I have a connection with Canada way back, but it brings me interesting memories that I had when I studied in Canada. Rohingya issue is something which is not going to go away, and I will tell you why. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that we have 1.2 million refugees only in Bangladesh, but there are Rohingyas, according to our research, in 19 countries. So you can well imagine the Rohingya diaspora is a big one. You also have Rohingyas in Canada, actually. You have large number of Rohingyas in India, in Malaysia, in Pakistan, in Saudi Arabia, in Indonesia, and I can go on and on, in Japan, in Australia. So it's a diaspora that has suffered what Azim Ibrahim, one of the very good scholar on this, and he said it before 2017, that it's a hidden genocide or slow genocide. And his book came out before 2017. So what is the difference this time? Because we had exodus back in the 70s and also 90s. In the 90s, I was very much involved with this issue. But on those instances, we never had credible evidence that a genocide was committed. This time in August 2017, when 700,000 plus came, and now we have 1.2 million altogether, there is credible evidence that a genocide has taken place. Now, a lot of people think that genocide, you need, hundreds and thousands of people to be killed. That is not what genocide is all about. You can have a genocide even without killing. It's a legal definition. You and I can't change it. And the definition stands as intention to destroy. And then again, it says in whole or in part. So it doesn't have to be in whole. It has to be in part. intention to destroy in 4 categories: national, ethnic, racial, and religious. Uh, Even if you don't give education deliberately, it can be a genocide. Uh, and not to mention now, rape has become a genocidal offense. So if you look at all those things, all the categories and all, there's no reason why this should not be a genocide. And that is precisely the position that we took on the day, almost on the first week of when we were getting information back in 2017. And we have maintained that. I guess government was very slow in thinking some of these things, but we were pointing out that this is different from the 70s and the 90s. And we were pushing for, so that justice be brought in. And since a genocide has taken place, at least from us, we were pointing out that it is no longer a bilateral issue between Bangladesh and Myanmar. When you have a genocide, it becomes automatically an international issue. It cannot be limited to the territorial boundaries of these 2 countries. Whenever a genocide is committed, it doesn't matter which country. It becomes, by definition, an international issue. And that is precisely our position was. So the first thing we have to remember that there is credible, evidence this time, and that is precisely the reason why we have the ICJ already in place. I'm sure some of you are familiar that there have been provisional judgment on that. And we also have ICC operating as well. But ICC was not there in the 70s and 90s, but it will be interesting to see how ICC, which really focuses on individuals, unlike ICJ, we have to see what happens. Now, since it's a genocide, that gives it changes the whole dimension. And the reason why, at least I'm interested in this issue, not that I've not written before 2017, but I guess now it becomes more important. The second thing that we need to keep in mind is that in 2017, we had 7,000 plus come to Bangladesh, and with 1.2 million now, it is a bigger population than Bhutan. Now, this Bhutan inside Bangladesh took place in 3 months. Bhutan became Bhutan in 60,000 years. So you can see no infrastructure, nothing of that kind. You can't do it. You can't create a state out of nothing in 3 months. So the enormous challenge that Bangladesh faced, it's almost, unless somebody who has gone there in August and September and October would know what kind of situation was there. And then if they go now, they probably would be amazed that the partnership that somehow the Geo and NGO partnership that we have, somehow we managed relatively, I would say, well. And one of the good reasons why we could do that, because Bangladesh is known almost to be an expert when it comes to disaster management. Now, this time the disaster was human, not a natural disaster. Well, natural disaster is also human-led in some way. One can talk about that. But this was really a human-led disaster. But disaster is the disaster. So when in August, these people started coming in, and when the government decided that the border should be open, we can't stop it. And there's good reason for that, because Bangladesh came out of genocide itself. And Bangladesh came out of refugees. Don't forget, every house probably has a refugee or knows a refugee back in 71. We were part of the spirit of 71 that we say. So there was no reason for us to block. There were some people who were trying to block it, but then the government decided, no, let them in. And the people really received them well. This also we have to keep in mind. So here you have in 3 months, more than Bhutan been established inside Bangladesh. So that is the picture one should keep in mind when we talk about some of the problems. There are enormous problems, no doubt about it, but we need to keep that in our head. Now, this time, as you can see, it is genocide which allowed the ICJ process to start. Now, very few people actually thought that the ICJ would be so quick. Even we were surprised. But on the top of that, the surprise came from the country which put up the case. Nobody in the wildest imagination thought it would be the Gambia. Now, whoever thought, people in Bangladesh hardly know the country. I'm sure the Rohingyas also, bulk of them probably would not know them. But here is Gambia. Given Gambia's own experience, at least those who are in the policymakers, their experience in Africa, not to mention particularly the Rwanda genocide, and let them, take this bold decision. So we personally, I was pretty surprised. Now at the ICJ, something has come up that we need to keep in mind: the provisional judgment and also the hearing. I was there when the hearing took place, so I can say, almost verbatim what was going on. Now, one thing that happened throughout the presentations, particularly of Myanmar, including Aung San Suu Kyi, not for once did she mention that they were illegal Bangladeshis or Bengalis. Not for once, because that is the common discourse that takes place in Myanmar, and some of the other countries also think that they are illegal Bengalis, but not for once did the Myanmar team say that they are Bengalis, that they are illegal. The term that they used was Arakanese Muslims. And they were saying that we want to take them back, all those things. Because I think one of the things that Myanmar, the pressure they felt, that if ICJ comes and points out that it is a genocidal state, then they had it. So I think they were trying to save, at the most, at least they wanted a split verdict. And this is the second thing that has come up. When the verdict came out in January, the provisional measure that the Gambia wanted, it was unanimous. It was a unanimous decision by judges from China, from Myanmar itself, not to mention of India, Russia. You have good number of judges there, and they all came with a unanimous decision. That was, historic, I would say. The second historic thing that happened in the provisional measures judgment is ICJ used the term Rohingya. And I think this is for the first time that the Rohingyas at an international legal position, they got a recognition. That, I think, when we heard the verdict being read, at least personally, I would say, I thought at least the Rohingyas, got something out of this whole process. We really don't know when the final judgment will come, what will happen, but still, it's a major victory. Here, I have to thank Canada, because Canada and Netherlands are the two countries which supported the Gambia. Other European countries did not, who talk so much about human rights and transparency and all those, and are active on many genocidal issues. But unfortunately, their support came after the provisional measures were declared, not before. It was only Canada and the Netherlands. And I want to put that into record, because that's very important to build a global solidarity on the issue of genocide. Now, the point will always come that why Myanmar, could do something of this kind. And I'm jumping from one to other. I understand there will be a Q&A or something of the so we can come back to some of the clarifications, right? So the question is always I think they succeeded in at least getting three countries, and I say this openly, in their pocket. Of course, China, no doubt about it. But quite sadly, I would say India and Japan. I say sadly because India supported us back in 1971 because of genocide. I don't want to believe that there was some other political and other interest. There are interests. I am an IR person. I'm familiar with realism and all, but the point is, we don't want to believe that. We think, no, there was this genocide, and that's precisely the reason why India supported. Now, the same India, well, not the same India now, because you don't have the same political regime. India has transformed. Congress is not in power. You have BJP, which is which believes in two-nation theory, almost similar to Pakistan's two-nation theory. So you have a different India. That much I can understand. But we were literally, surprised that India was also in Myanmar's pocket. And the third country, Japan, which also talks about transparency, which itself suffered Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That a country which suffered Hiroshima and Nagasaki could support Myanmar. Even now, even last week, they had $2 billion agreement with Myanmar government. At least I have to say it's shameless. That is shameless, because this is not something we expect from Japan, that the kind of, Japan, the ideas that we get. And I'm very close to Japan because I stayed there for a year, and I know my friends, my Japanese friends, and I'm quite surprised this particular government of Mr. Abe would take Japan in a direction which really doesn't belong to the spirit of Japan that we are familiar with. So these three countries, somehow Myanmar managed, and that emboldened them. There is a race, because I believe probably India and Japan wants to displace China from there in all those things. But that would be naive. I've been saying this even to my Delhi friends, policymakers, that's naive. The China-Myanmar relationship goes back, for years. When nobody cared about Myanmar, it was China which was there. So to think, and now with China with so much money in their pocket, to think that you can displace, and here I believe they were fooled by Aung San Suu Kyi. Somebody ought to read Aung San Suu Kyi's some of the papers and some of the statements she had about the Rohingyas before she became the leader. And in the preface of the second edition of the book on the Rohingyas, I had to cite that. It's quite quite sad, and so I think this very idea of some that we need Aung San Suu Kyi because of democracy against the military, just have to keep in mind that you can't create democracy with one person. And I don't have to flag this. One person cannot create democracy. You need institutions, you need people, you need a critical mass. And, countries after countries are lagging behind and failing even after hundreds of years of experience. So to think that one person can displace the military, where will the Myanmar military go? To the Bay of Bengal, they will vanish. So this is naive idea. I think it's a pure business interest, which is sad. Now, I will end by saying just two or things, because we are into COVID-19, so I want to bring that in. But more importantly, the issue of repatriation, because this is something that we all talk. And now Myanmar is saying, yes, we want to take them back, but we can't take them back because Arakan army is fighting. Now, I'm not giving a PowerPoint presentation, but I have this fascinating map where you can see whole of Myanmar, they have internal, what you call, insurgencies. And it is not against the Rohingyas, which they did genocide. They have a genocide issue with the Karens, with the Shans, with the Chins. There are other ethnic communities in Myanmar which also suffered genocide. It is only that it never got flagged. Look at the current situation. Look at the Chin and the Shans. And they are fighting for years. So this whole of Myanmar, and I have this fantastic map where you can see all these dots of insurgencies throughout Myanmar. So the Myanmar has never been, quote unquote, a normal state in any way. To now say that we can't take them back because of the Arakan army, if that is the case, and I believe to some extent that is the case, I think it's high time that we should talk about safe zone. I think there should be a safe zone created in the Arakan where these people can take back, go back. And not to mention, Myanmar need to change some laws, because you can't have the 1982 constitution and then decide that the Rohingyas would come back happily without changing laws. Not to mention after you commit genocide. It's just like back in 71, why you 10 million refugees go back to, East Bengal or East Pakistan, if Pakistan would say, come back when you commit a genocide. So here they have to change laws if they are serious in this matter, bring new amendments or bring new rules and take them as citizens, as you have in the Kofi Annan Commission report. So the point here is that is not there. And so they are talking about this Arakan army. If that is the case, I think it's high time the safe zones should be created and the peacekeepers can actually come from ASEAN countries or China or even Japan, if they are serious, or even India, if they want to bring their friendly countries as peacekeepers. But they can't say that our, country is in insurgency. The country has been insurgency for, throughout, way back, I guess, 1962 after, but even before 1962. The final thing I'll stop, and then this has to do with the COVID-19. Now, the COVID-19 so far, if you look at per million death figure, well, relatively speaking, per million, then you can say Bangladesh, relatively, if you compare with US or Brazil, even Canada. Canada, my figures a little bit old, 1 week old. Canada, 1 per million is 234 people died. USA is more 425, but now it's much bigger. Whereas Bangladesh is 15. Even if you say the data is poor, and I will agree to that, even if you make it 100%, which you can't, because we have all these COVID-19 symptoms also been mapped and looking into the different hospitals and all those. But even if you can, make it that it's not 15, it's 20, it's much less compared to some of the developed countries, at least up until now. But there is no guarantee that it is going to remain there, because the kind of concentration of people you have. Now, Bangladesh, if you're familiar with Bangladesh's, it's nearly 3,000 people per square mile. So when people talk about New Zealand doing good, I always, tell my students, how many people per square mile in New Zealand? They say, sir, it's 47. So, my 47 per square mile, my students can actually take care of New Zealand. That's my argument. Now, Australia, only 7 people per square mile. Now, 7 people can go door to door and give all the testing instrument. But when you have 3,000, then it's too much. Same would be the case, I believe, in some of the big countries. Now, the point here is the concentration of the people in that 1.1 million, which is bigger than Bhutan. Those who are not familiar with Bhutan's population is less than 800,000. And not to mention, Bhutan has a king. But here, you have a triple RC person who is younger than me. And I always tell him that, oh my God, it's unthinkable. It's such a young man looking after 1.1 million. The fellow should get some credit at one point of time. We have a new one. He's also younger, much younger than me. So the point here is, if things get bad, and there's no guarantee, given the medical news that we are, nobody still have a grip on that, when will the vaccine will be there? So my argument here is, if it gets bad, and since Rohingyas got already infected, not to the extent the alarm that people were going, somehow I will say, the figures that I have, 5 people died. And the number of infection, if you say, still is very low. And one can, have all the discussions on that. But suppose it gets bad, then what happens? And here my argument would be that we need to think about a place where we need a kind of a medical system. Let's put it that way. where not only Rohingyas but even Bangladeshis can go and have a place where the critical patients and all they can be quarantined and get better, because we don't have that kind of a structure. China has, as you know, the moment you land, they can keep you somewhere for 2 weeks. They have managed to do that. And now with all the theories that we have, at least one thing has proven right, probably right, that you need to quarantine. There's no other than, you need to put them in a place at least for 2 weeks so that the virus doesn't get spread. And so I think one argument I've been pushing forward is the Bhasanchar area, which needs to be revisited. And I say this, and I'll just take 2 minutes and I'll stop there. There was this case where you had these boat people trying to go to Malaysia, and they actually went from Myanmar. They did not go from Cox's Bazar. They went from from Myanmar, and Malaysia did not take them because Malaysia said they could be COVID-19 patients or the virus could be there. And they were floating and floating and floating, and then finally Bangladesh took them. And what Bangladesh did, because they can't take them and put them straight to the Cox's Bazar camps, because that would also be dangerous for the camps. So they put them in Bhasanchar, I'm sure some of you would know that. Now that gave me an idea that why not develop that particular place as a medical system where both Rohingyas and the Bangladeshis can actually use it even after, for the Bangladeshis, even after pandemic. I say this and I'll stop by saying that. You see, the virus came and we were tracing right from 8th March. We have every week we bring out COVID-19 graphics. I'm sure some of you are familiar. And we were mapping, different categories and figures and all. 400 to 600,000 people came back from Italy and Germany mainly from January to March. And these were the people who actually brought the virus, okay? Because the people who came from Wuhan, if you remember back in February, government put them in quarantine because their number were few, and none of them had any positive. They were all negative actually. But these 400 to 600,000 people who came, the airport did not have a system. Bangladesh does not have a system to quarantine 600,000 people. I guess only China probably could do. And that's precisely the reason why Italy suffered. That's precisely the reason why US is suffering. Because they have not done what Vietnam and what South Korea and what China did. Or even Kerala, for instance, did. So my argument here is we cannot be sure that the pandemic, this COVID-19 will go away. We cannot be even sure that there will not be another pandemic in coming days. So this is an opportunity to do something out of the box. Now, it's not saying one thing and doing it is different. But since there is a little bit of infrastructure and it's just lying vacant, I just thought that let me flag this, because since a lot of international audience would be listening, and I think there can be an international pool of doctors who are volunteers throughout their life, who love to work as volunteers, could come to this particular island and make a difference, not only to the Rohingyas if they get infected, and there is a possibility of that, and if Bangladeshis also get infected at a level, 3 months from now, we desperately need a place, and not to mention a kind of a structure by which we can save lives. I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Imtiaz, for your, I would say, a very well-rounded discussion which covered COVID-19 and the number of genocide aspects. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's welcome Dr. Ali Riaz, and the floor is yours, sir. Sir, if you unmute the mic, sir, kindly.
Okay. Thank you, Kausar, for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about the Rohingya crisis, particularly looking at the geopolitical dimension and what is the future forward. I will try to uh, remain focused on these two aspects of our conversation. Why now? Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has rightly pointed out that 2017 is different from any previous one. Uh, and we know the history. Most of your audience is familiar with what have happened since then. So I'm not going to rehash the history since 1982 and so on, or even before. What is different? And there lies actually the answer to the future question lies here, if we can understand and if we can focus on this. It is the geopolitics. And Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has mentioned about investment. I will come to that. So within the question of why in 2017, what is the geopolitics? I say first thing is the geopolitics, meaning the importance, geographical importance of Myanmar has increased. Uh, Previously, China was always there, as Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has mentioned. The 1962 coup d'etat, since then everyone left. Who stood by China? Who stood by Myanmar? It's China. It's only China who stood by. Days in, days out. And here we have to understand the relationship between the China and the Myanmar was not at the civil military relationship. It was a military to military relationship. The relationship was between Tatmadaw and PLA. It has always been like that. And hence, this solid ground of this relationship remained intact even when Aung San Suu Kyi emerged. This is where the Obama administration got it completely wrong. In 2012, when in the by-elections, Aung San Suu Kyi emerged, her party emerged, 65 seats out of 68 in by-elections, and they thought that they have the person who can change everything and democracy is going to drop from sky in Myanmar. Didn't they know that it cannot be done? They knew. I'm not suggesting that they're naive. I'm not suggesting they're stupid. They knew that it is an uphill task. They wanted to take the risk to actually limit the influence of China. Remember, it is the Obama administration. Remember, the Asia pivot. Remember, the Trans-Pacific Partnership was being discussed. That means all these things were within that frame, that if we even can replace, if not replace, can actually push a little bit China into, and the field could be, the battleground, so to speak, can be Myanmar. And that is where the Obama administration's policy, which was very quick, what I describe as all carrot no stick policy. They withdrew their sanctions by 2016, and when they end the sanctions in 2016, that in a sense bolstered Aung San Suu Kyi, in a sense. Why? Because she's the one, her emergence is bringing out Myanmar from the shadow. Myanmar is becoming a member of the international community, so to speak. Why? Because the Myanmar's military has given a little bit of space. To who? It is to Aung San Suu Kyi. West thought, United States included, that they have found the panacea, the icon of democracy. But as Imtiaz has rightly pointed out, one person cannot do it. It became, but the hope was that at least there would be what I describe as a hybrid regime, a share between the military and the civilian, and somehow there would be some facade of democracy that would allow some regular election gradually. And Lindbergh and others in the field of political science have always spoken about democratization through election. If you keep on having election, at one point something will happen. I don't agree with that, but that is the argument Lindberghs have made with respect to authoritarian regime. That was the driving force in understanding. So what happened? All these things, Aung San Suu Kyi, when the Obama administration and other found the rationale that we should work with Aung San Suu Kyi. We know that she's not going to bring all the things, but we need to work because gradually we do. Now here comes the Tatmadaw, here comes the military. That what do we do when she's being embraced by West. And the China could understand quite easily that this is the battleground. So if it is not Aung San Suu Kyi, who is it? It is their old friend Tatmadaw. It is the military that you'll have to have more relationship. And again, remember it is post 2016 I'm talking about, or maybe 2012. You can go back. China already has a great ambition. China already had that ambition, but never expressed, never went out of its own borders, except, of course, the Vietnam War with the Vietnam. But the point is that with this kind of situation, China re-established or reinforced this relationship, and Aung San Suu Kyi couldn't get out of the grip of the military. She made, I don't say she had to, she made a Faustian bargain. And that Faustian bargain is what kept her in power. She liked the power. I mean, good God, who doesn't? I wish I could love it too. But the point is, she loved it. She embraced it. When West thought she would embrace the democratic ideals, and the way she fought on the street would fight within the administration, within the power, corridor, she didn't. For survival, for power, take whatever it is. And her attitude towards Rohingyas, and we are talking about Rohingya situation, had never been very positive. Look at before the transition. The military government before the transition to the quote-unquote the civilian government, there were a series of national dialogue with respect to, there's all these ethnic conflicts or the insurgencies that have been there since 1962, if not before. They tried to wrap it up. And in those, Rohingyas were not involved. And it continued under the Aung San Suu Kyi administration. She didn't want to include them either. So what does that mean? That attitude, the military's attitude. The second point, this is the geopolitics of it. China has always, the second point, geostrategy. What is Myanmar? Myanmar is the gateway to Southeast Asia and East Asia. Gateway, and in Southeast Asia, there are territorial disputes, South China Sea, and here, increasingly, given the economic power has shifted to Asia, given the rise of China, given the emergence of Vietnam and others as an economic actor, what do we see? This area has become energy hungry. Energy hungry means they need more energy. And where does this come from? Come from the Middle East and other places. And the Malacca Strait. Malacca Strait is the key choke point of oil trade. Who wants to go through it? Does China wants to go through it? They had to. And then we have South China Sea problem, right? They had to. If they can avoid that one, why would they do it? How can they avoid it? If they can actually don't have to take their ship through the Malacca Strait. How do you avoid that one? You unload it somewhere before the Malacca Strait, and that is Myanmar. It is the gateway to Southeast Asia and East Asia, and that is, you have a presence at the gateway. And if you have a port, if you have a presence, not only in the business sense, not only in the sense of the trade, which is very important, particularly in the energy sense, it is very, 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 very important. But also, from a very strategic point of view, whether it's Gwalior, whether it is, in case of Sri Lanka, you have a presence, a physical presence at the gateway. You can control a lot of things, or at least surveillance, right? And here you have a friend who you have fought for in the international community. You stood by since 1962, and here is 2017. Your friend need you. What do? You leave her, leave the friend? No, you don't. It is your absolute geostrategic interest that you stand by and put your foot there, have a surveillance. Third point. Professor Imtiaz Ahmed has brought it in investment. We are talking what? Today is July 24th, right? In June, OECD has worked with Myanmar to complete its second investment policy review, IPR. OECD, we are talking about OECD. When was the last time it was done? This is the second one. When was the last time it was done? In 2014. Since then, something happened. A genocide has taken place. A genocide has taken place in Myanmar. That has not stopped OECD from working with in this IPR. In the last 8 months, Myanmar has received 4.10 billion US dollars investment. Last 8 months, right? We always talk about China. Of course, China is a major investor, PRI and everything. But until recently, until this fiscal year, who was the largest investor in Myanmar? It is Singapore. It is Singapore. It's not China. If you look at the list, who are on the top? China, Hong Kong, SAR, Japan. Singapore topped the list until recently, for a long period. It's not a single year we are talking to. So this is tied to what? Why they're investing there? By 2030, and this is a pre-COVID projection, by 2030, Myanmar was supposed to have a 30 million large middle class. You want to sell Coke? 30 million Cokes every day? They shouldn't be drink everyday Coke, I know. That's not healthy. But if they do, don't you want it? Of course they want it. Of course China wants it. Of course Japan wants it. Of course Singapore wants it, right? Now, the fourth point with respect to this weapons issues of the geopolitics. Weapons trade. Plain and simple thing, right? Even after, and I'm quoting the UN report last year, 14 companies from China, North Korea, India, Israel, the Philippines, Russia, and Ukraine. Oh, by the way, a very interesting thing that with respect to investment, you know, Estonia, a country like Estonia has invested in Myanmar. Good God, I mean, they couldn't find any other place to in a country which is racked with genocides, more than one. It is not only the Rohingyas, and Imtiaz has rightly pointed out the themes and weapons trade. 14 countries are involved, right? Myanmar spent a huge amount of money in arms import. How much? Last year, $252 million were spent on buying weapons. This is simply numbers, In 2011, you'd be amazed. $667 million was spent to buy weapons. Who sells it? Russia sells it. China sells it. So, do you want to sell that weapon? And your friend is in a hot soup. What do you do? Right? And sometimes people just simply ignore the fact. The first budget that NLD, NLD government came in, what was the first budget? It was the 2017-18 budget, right? Because they came into power in 2016, the first budget that they paid. Myanmar's allocated $2.1 billion, $2.1 billion in their budget for defense and related expenses. It's a democratic party led by Aung San Suu Kyi, the winner of the Peace Nobel Prize. 3.1% of their GDP in a single year under a so-called democratic leadership went into the defense budget. Imagine. And that is what we are talking about. Lately, in Singapore, there was a few months ago, I guess, if I'm not wrong, there was this weapons. I mean, of course, before the COVID came, there was a weapons, sort of fair or whatever they call it, And Myanmar expressed the desire to export light weapons. Now they are well prepared. So this is the big picture. Rohingya crisis is located within this big picture. And we know why Rakhine is the one. Why Kayak Payu, why Sittaway, we know that because special economic zone has been established. And India is, lately Indians, newspapers and media are up in arms. How come India is not investing? Only 3.7% of our investment went to the Myanmar. We should put more money, more money. Never ever they say that there was a genocide. Never ever they say that this is the country they're talking about has perpetrated a genocide, continuing it, and it is now on the dock in ICC and ICJ. Never ever the Indian media talks about it. In Human Rights Forum, India votes either abstain or votes in favor. So we may call India a friend. Let's call it a friend, but you can choose your friend who might stab you on the back. But fine, go ahead, say we're friend. Who stops you? Uh, last month alone, and these are the facts. One of the Indian companies, ONGC's, the overseas unit, what is it called, Videsh Limited or something, OVL, has got approval to invest $121 million in Myanmar. This is India. Understand? I mean, I understand. They want to make money. Now there's the second question. What is the future of the Rohingya refugees? Okay. I'm going to go out of the box. First of all, we know it is a stalemate. It was a stalemate even before the COVID came in. Now the COVID came in and everyone justifies everything. I mean, even my students who didn't submit the paper on time last semester thought that it is because of the COVID. Yes, it was since March. But then again, my undergraduate student finds an excuse. I find an excuse not submitting my paper on time to a journal saying that it is COVID. And, everyone can find their justification. So be it. But fact remains is this. The fact is that COVID has actually created an additional roadblocks towards the solution of the crisis. So yet there has to be, right? The situation has reached impasse, whereas 1.2 million people are suffering every day. For them, now additional risk of COVID has befallen on them. Fortunately, yet not to be infected as much could have been. Touch wood, bless our art, whatever. It hasn't. Hopefully, it will stay there. But that doesn't diminish their everyday struggle. That does not diminish the suffering, the misery they're facing every day. Who wants to live in that kind of condition? Nobody chooses a condition like that. Nobody. Whether it is Rohingyas or the Palestinians or the Syrian refugees or anyone, no refugees choose to be a refugee. When the Bangladeshis had to do it, they didn't choose it. So what is the solution then? We know the geostrategic situation. Why China is China? Why India is India? Why Japan is Japan? We know what Myanmar's relationship and the so-called democratic leader and the military, we know that one, how they are playing the game in ICJ, pushed into and acknowledged, but never acknowledged to that extent. And whether they're complying, we don't know. Hopefully we'll know whether they're complying to the interim measures directives by International Court of Justice. ICC process would take years and they don't have the instrument to implement those push. With those kind of background, what are the solutions? What can we think? I think there are 5 solutions, 5 possible scenarios. Rather, let me tell it 5 scenarios. What is the first one? What is described as repatriation? I call it return. Return of Rohingyas with safety and dignity. What does that mean? That means that requires recognition of Rohingyas as an ethnic group, as a citizen, changing the 1982 provisions, ensuring equal rights, including education and everything. That is the ideal solution. That ideal solution is less likely at this point. I wish it was, but that is the less likely. And it could have been, Bangladesh could have been moved in that direction if what Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina told UNGA, the proposal that she put forward in 2017, September, with a 5-point, with a safe zone, that was the best course of action in September 2017. It was a prudent, it was a good move. Unfortunately, Bangladesh stepped out of it. Prime Minister proposed it. Bangladesh diplomatic maneuvering was not actually pushing in that direction, rather a bilateral one. So that is the likely scenario that if there's taking from that proposal and the Dhaka Declaration, that is my second point, the second scenario. Right to protect R2P. Pursue the R2P line, see whether it can be done, whether an international community, whether, as Professor Imtiaz Ahmed had noted, whether it could be Chinese, Japanese, Indians protecting the safe zone. They're your friend. And interestingly, all of them are Bangladesh's friend too. Right? Can that be done? Under R2P, through the UN process, convincing China and allowing China to protect. That is my second scenario. That is another the solution that Bangladesh can pursue. Third solution, I know it is going to raise eyebrows. Integration. Take 1.2 million Rohingyas and integrate them into the Bangladeshi society. Make them as a productive partner of the society. Are there any examples of that? Yes, of course. Enter Palestinians in Jordan has become that. Post, this Syrian crisis, hundreds and thousands have been integrated into the Western society. Germany is a case in point. I know the Syrian refugees are in limbo. 3.6 million Syrian refugees are in Turkey, in limbo, practically in limbo. European Union pays $6 billion euros. And recently, Erdogan, each and every time he has any problem with Europe, he bring out this piece of paper and say, I'm going to tear it off. I'm not going to listen to you guys, That's what is happening every time that this, game. Is that a possibility? There is a downside. There is a serious downside. I would say at least two serious downsides. One is that means we are allowing Myanmar to get away with a genocide. Are we? That's one thing. Whether ICC process would eventually, where would it lead? I don't know. Usually it takes longer time, and again, they have no instrument. Let us understand, they have no instrument to impose this. So that's the third. What is the fourth one? The resettlement of Rohingyas. Bangladesh has not acceded to the Refugee Convention of 51 or the 67 protocol. It becomes very difficult. Yet, will that take care of 1.2 million? I don't think that is possible. And also, the resettlement program has not actually succeeded in all cases. But resettlement, in some cases, have taken place and succeeded to some extent. Maybe, But then again, the downside is that Myanmar gets away, and when you resettle the Rohingya community, and also you have worked on Rohingyas very, I've read your Al-Majid's book. The cultural identity will be decimated. And I don't call it cultural identity, I call it as a nationhood. The ethnic nation, the Rohingya nationhood will be completely decimated when they're in the diaspora. We know, I've lived enough and outside in Bangladesh and diaspora community, I know. How that affects. Building a culture on a distant land of your own is not an easy task. All of us have at some point or another have lived outside the country, and we have seen this community and part of that. The Rohingya community will lose their cultural distinct identity. And of course, the land, homeland. Land has an importance. Wherever we live, at the end of somehow the land has, personally, whether you and I feel attachment is a different thing. As a community, always there is an attachment to land. The diaspora community and everywhere, even when even not in the diaspora community. Why people at the end of the day, when there is a Eid vacation, everyone rush into what they call home. After living 40 years in Dhaka, someone thinks that in the COVID situation, he's going back home. So Dhaka has never been his home because that is not the land he has. The final point, the fifth scenario, so is launching a boycott movement against Myanmar. Is it easy? Is it possible? Launch a boycott Myanmar movement. It will take time. It will take other countries. How effective that would be? Initially, that will be very less effective. That requires international civil societies more participation. It requires the Bangladesh or any country's leadership. Going back to the resettlement issue, Canada has shown interest, to my knowledge, of taking the Rohingyas. These are the 5 possible scenarios. I have already steered the boat much. Now let me pretty much wreck it. How would Bangladesh actually negotiate with China? Now that in the regional politics, Bangladesh seems to be tilting toward China as opposed to tilting India, or balancing act, however you describe it. How about telling China that this is our demand? That as India-China rivalry of sphere of influence is intensifying, can Bangladesh put this out on the table as a condition? Because China, if anyone can convince Myanmar to take even a single person, let alone 1.2 million, it is China. It's not Russia. It's not India. It's not Japan even. Japan can put a dent. And it was, yes, like Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, I was shocked to see the abject failure of Bangladeshi diplomacy to see that Japan has actually sided with them. Good God, Japan? Professor Ahmed has mentioned about the Nagasaki, Hiroshima. Even if I don't talk those things, Japan has a significant investment in Bangladesh. And Japanese investments are serious investments. Bangladesh, one of the very close friends. Japan has always been very close friend, particularly in terms of investment and economic cooperation. How come Bangladesh lost Japan? Anyway, going back to my wrecking the boat kind of suggestion, can this be on the table of the conversation? Has it been considered? I don't know, because I am not privy to the Bangladeshi's diplomatic maneuvering. If it has been put on the table, I wouldn't know. And so supposedly nobody would know unless an investigative journalist can dig it out and see what are the things on the table in conversation between Bangladesh and China. Can this be one? Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Riaz. I think it's a fascinating talk. We can go on forever, I think, with our 2 panelists on this issue. And but just to remind the audience that Japan has significant investment in Bangladesh through their GIC, JICA program, and also Japan lost 6 of their citizens in 2016 terrorist attack in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Let's welcome our next panelist to our discussion, Professor Dr. A.K. Mazharul Islam. And as you all are aware, he is one of the friends of CRRIC. And without further ado, Dr. Mazhar, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. I would say that Rohingya is a part of a global community which is called forcefully, people who are forcefully displaced. There are 71 million population in the world, and Myanmar, Rohingya group is one of those. You see, they are stateless and they are not refugee, and they are forcefully displaced. So we need to work something on this acronomical thing, that we need to understand it very well, that they are forcefully displaced and they are not refugees. So that's a critical. That reminds me. Probably we all have seen that Tom Hanks movie called Terminal, where that all of a sudden, Tom Hanks was saying that he belongs to nowhere, and that's kind of a thing is going on with Myanmar population, particularly those group who are living in limbo. I mean, they are in Bangladesh, but in person they are they're physically, they're psychologically, they're in Bangladesh, but all of their things are in Myanmar. But they do not have inherited a good memory from that. That's also important, that we need to work on the memory as well. If a boy, a Myanmar boy or girl who has got the age of 25 or 26, he or she does not have seen anything called peace, all those atrocities that has been taking place. So when Bangladesh took them shelter, Bangladesh has taken them as their own. I mean, it's not their physical entity only. There are all kinds of atrocity, all those things that is carried by them. So we need to also remember that. Now, as you mentioned about the geopolitical thing that needs to be, I mean, one of the macro level thing that we need to really focus on, because that at the end of the day, that's the why that Professor Ali Riaz and Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, both of them was talking about the investment of Japan in Myanmar, and the investment of the US, and you name it, how many countries are interested in Myanmar nowadays. So why? And that's a big question. I mean, why this is so important nowadays to invest in Myanmar, and how Bangladesh can get into this. I mean, Bangladesh do not have any investment in Myanmar right now, with some of their kind of a bilateral thing. Only their Bangladesh is working on that BIMSTEC and some I guess one corridor which is called BISM corridor, I guess. So these are the two things that BCIS corridor and BIMSTEC. These are the two things Bangladesh is working with Myanmar. Other than that, there is nothing between Myanmar and Bangladesh, except for the history that we inherit a history to get together. And having saying that, why it's not happening? Why, when you remember in 2017, when there was a joint declaration from Aung San Suu Kyi and Prime Minister Modi in US, where they have a joint kind of a announcement where they never mentioned the word genocide. Even they did not mention the word Rohingya. So up on them, I mean, from after 2017, we need to be very clear that India will not take interest in Myanmar, in favor of Bangladesh. That's pretty clear. I mean, So furthermore, India has got their border with two states of Myanmar, and there was a claim that there were some kind of groups who were disturbing the Indian territory, and Myanmar allowed them to drive them in the jungle of Arakans. So everybody has got interest, and the jungle of Arakan has got another part of interest, not only for the politicians but also for the militants. We have heard that IS and other has got a huge plan based on the jungle of Rohingya, Arakans. So these are multifaceted interest that is going on, that is there for Myanmar. So my point is that why India is not interested. It's pretty clear that India has got its direct interest with Myanmar than Bangladesh. I mean, of course, India has got some relationship with Bangladesh. I mean, but they will not work for Bangladesh against Myanmar. Then who is the big party? China. China has got that long history of relationship with Myanmar. And you see the trade, and this is the, as Professor Ali Riaz said, this is the relation between the army to army. I mean, it's and you see who are the owners of all this big business in Myanmar. The military people. I mean, the wives of the generals, they have got their huge business of the stone and pearls and all those that that attracted so many, investors in Myanmar as well. So so this is something that we also need to see. And furthermore, in 2012, we have seen there is an act called Land Act, which was being passed just to abstract the mineral resources in Myanmar by the military forces in the name of acquisition of land. For the national interest. So that 2012 Land Act needs to be ratified as well. That's a kind of a black act for the for the people of Rohingya. And you see, in 2013, China has got that plan of this gas pipeline that goes to the Yunnan province Yunnan province of the Kunming, where the gas line will be go directly from Myanmar to Kunming. So these are some of the very these are the some points of the interest of China Myanmar thing, but there are some deeper interests as well. So China will not be interested to go against Myanmar. So India will not be going against Myanmar. China will not be going against Myanmar. So Japan, who is relatively a very, kind of a humble friend of everyone, they also have got that huge investment plan in Myanmar. So Japan is also not there. And now think about the big player, US. You see the Obama administration and Trump administration is hugely different, and Trump does not have that interest. They have got their interest with China only. The only interest is that they need to, they need to go against China. And so if they want to go against China, they need to also have some interest in Myanmar, because that's a place they need to utilize to go against China. So US is not also going to do anything against Myanmar. You see how I see Myanmar military has got a huge diplomatic exercise, rather than they have got that they have got all those military atrocities, but they also have some diplomatic exercises they have been for last 10-30 years. So what we see, and furthermore we see Bangladeshi diplomacy is a very soft diplomacy in terms of repatriation and all that. So Professor Imtiaz also have been telling about the Vasantech opportunity. We can also think that as a medical opportunity only, because if Vasantech has a place to repatriate, internal repatriation happens in Vasantech from Cox's Bazar, that will give an impression that we are that will give an impression of Professor Ali Riaz's third or fourth scenario of adoption of so I don't think that adoption or kind of integration could be a possibility at the moment, since Bangladeshi population wise and politically it would be very sensitive to have them adopted or take it as our own citizens. And already that in the camps Kutupalong and the other camps where the Rohingyas are there, they have been accused for so many things. And Bangladeshi locals, they're already resistant about their Rohingya counterparts. So adoption could not be probably a possibility. So what else we have? So all those big players, they are not interested, and Bangladeshi diplomacy is not that strong enough to maneuver all this. So what is the future? So future is that they will remain here, and they will breed, and they will have second generation, third generation, and then they will be in some way or other in some long process, they will be part of the Bangladeshi community at some far point. So that's the future I only see. If there is a big if we do not take a hard diplomacy, that's not hard for the sense of hard, but it's soft in in the name of art. I mean, it's this careless, careful thing. I mean, we need to really work hard if we need to have a repetition going to happen from Bangladesh to Myanmar. And the safe zone that has been discussed, I mean, safe zone, could be a wonderful idea, but who will give you the safe zone? Myanmar? No. India? No. I mean, who else? Canada? Probably. I mean, they will say yes, and but ultimately, down the road, it's no. And then, so who will give you the safe zone? Nobody will give you the safe zone, as a matter of fact. So what remains? It remains. Frankly speaking, I don't see any repatriation future for the Rohingya population from Bangladesh to Myanmar. Only I see that they will be here, and we need to really work hard how we can, we can really make our things better with them, and that's the only thing that remains. So I'll stop here just by saying that if we need to address this Rohingya crisis, we call it crisis, and we need to think it is a crisis. When crisis becomes a habit, that is no longer a crisis. I mean, that crisis has become a part of our daily life. I know it's crisis never lasts for long. I mean, crisis is a temporary thing, but for this is, we need to term it as a crisis as long as it goes. I mean, it's a crisis. It's not that they will be there, yeah, and they will have already, they have got third generation, and we don't want to see any fourth generation, but the fourth generation is coming in. So with this, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mazhar, for your part of the presentation. Dear audience, we have finished our first part of listening to the wonderful presentations by the panelists. At this stage, let me welcome Dr. Hilal Mohiuddin from Bangladesh. He is the Director of Research and Communication of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada. He also teaches as a professor of anthropology in the North-South University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. At this stage of the webinar, let's hear some of the brief comments from Dr. Hilal on this topic, and then I'll formally open the question and answer session. But just to remind all our audiences, those are sending questions and expecting some of them to be answered today, and also others, that it is approaching midnight in Bangladesh, and those who are, especially Dr. Imtiaz and Dr. Mazhar and Dr. Hilal, is close to midnight. So we'll just keep our Q&A and discussion session quite limited moving forward. So Dr. Hilal, please have your comments to the panelists or others in general now. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, professors, and thank you, Dr. Kausar, for giving me the opportunity to speak about, actually to make some comments on the presentations. It was very stimulating discussion for sure. I was thoroughly enjoying it. And if I go to pick up some of the points, probably I would be able to pick up at least 30 or 50. It's a so interesting and a stimulating discussion in that sense. But I would be focusing more on three very crucial issues. One is, I believe my camera is not working properly, but anyway, I'm trying my best to make it work properly. It's working now. I will be focusing mostly on three things. Since the topic is geopolitics, of course, safe zone, that's one good option. And we have been talking a lot about this option, the viability of this option, and how it might work better for all of the stakeholders, especially the regional partners and others. So this is a very big question at this stage. The second one is, I believe, military-industrial complex. To our understanding, it is increasing throughout the world. Not only in Myanmar, even in Bangladesh, military is engaged in business and economic activities. And we don't know how much they are really compromising their national interest, sort of security interest, sort of mandates. But this is a concern for many of us, especially the sociologists and anthropologists, someone like me. We are trying to understand the dynamics for over the last 1 decade. And these days we see that it's not only Myanmar, Bangladesh to some extent is just heading toward that direction. And then others too. China is already there for quite long time. And other than China, Japan is also, so far we know, and so far we are grabbing the information, in Japan as well, some kind of military industrial complex is gaining ground these days. So these are the issues. And taking into consideration these two, I would really try to request our esteemed panelists to focus a little bit more about how safe zone might work. As I was listening to Dr. Mazhar, he was kind of pessimistic, but I think I am more in line with the idea of Dr. Ali Riaz. I think it's possible. The thing is that we have to find out a good way to engage the stakeholders, especially the regional players. In that sense, I have always been thinking about the role of ASEAN, how we might make ASEAN take proactive role and play their duties properly. Other than that, SARC can be another option, but we know that it's a dead horse at this moment. It's not working really that well. But ASEAN, I think, is still could be a good possibility. The thing is that how we would be bringing them in the same table just for some sort of diplomatic solutions. Although Dr. Mazhar, as I understood him, I don't know whether I am correct or wrong, but he sounds quite pessimistic that, okay, we are in soft diplomacy. I don't know whether you are talking about soft diplomacy means software sort of diplomacy, because these days we are using software sort of diplomacy as soft diplomacy, and hard diplomacy, I'm not quite sure. I am not really familiar with this term. So anyway, I am a little bit confused about that. We know that economics is playing the real part there, and all the actors, regional actors, those who can really make a big difference, especially in the context of a big humanitarian crisis. Given the fact that genocide is taken place, all of us know that, and it's acknowledged by the world communities all over the world. Even the investors that are investing in this country, especially in Myanmar, they also know that United Nations, not only United Nations, through Gambia, through ICJ, through ICC processes, and the role of Canada, revoking the citizenship, honorary citizenship of Aung San Suu Kyi, and the world's only human rights museum taking down Suu Kyi Gallery from display in London and in the other places, different universities, even in the United States of America. So there were some souvenirs as Suu Kyi, one of the Nobel laureate, peace Nobel laureate, and now it is being challenged, and they're being proactive. So all over the world, there is a kind of disapproval of Myanmar section and Suu Kyi's role in the genocide. But still, all other countries are investing there in this country. So we are familiar with the notion, the concept of deep politics. I see that deep economics is very important as well, especially these days. Probably we need to think about it too, that it's a deep economics, no matter whether it is Belt and Road Initiative or gas and pipeline connection, deep sea port and all other things. We know that it's taken for granted that, okay, they have their economic interest there. But the biggest problem is that we are talking about geopolitics is to solve this crisis. This is a big crisis. Bangladesh can't contain it forever. And if we can't just simply say that, okay, they will not be going back to Myanmar very soon, we have to find out a way. There is no other alternative. Bangladesh can't contain it, especially now after COVID. Bangladesh is really going to suffer. In the next 2 or 3 years, we might get a kind of famine or other sort of economic disaster. Therefore, we cannot really afford to live with a fancy that the international communities and the charitable organizations, NGOs, and others will keep helping us, especially Bangladesh and Rohingya. It might win out, and we might not get the same type of sympathy and empathy for the Rohingyas that we have now. As you have already mentioned, that locally it's a very contentious situation. Local people are not accepting them. Probably they are just standing them for time being, but we don't know the level of resentment that might sprout at some point, either very soon or it might take a little while. We don't know. But risk is there, a very strong risk is there. Given all these conditions, we have to think about either their resettlement or their repatriation by any means. And at the diplomatic level, we all know that we did not do our duties probably properly. We are kind of half-hearted. It's not my opinion. I think all over the world, people are thinking that way, that Bangladesh is not really doing that well diplomatically. I don't know how they will do it. But probably, especially after today's discussion, I am pretty sure that people will think about the safe zone very seriously. To my understanding, it is very important. And the second one is Bangladesh military's relationship. Previously, 3-4 visits were made to Myanmar, and both countries' militaries sat together. We don't know the proceedings of the discussions. How did that work, and whether they are coming out with some sort of viable solutions or some hopes for us. Given all these situations again and again, probably I would be focusing more on thinking about safe zone. To my understanding, this would be the biggest solution at this moment, and uh, I don't see any other options, because Dr. Riaz very clearly pointed out 5 possible options. Of those options, still, to my understanding, safe zone probably would be, especially for at this moment, uh, should be the main agenda in our plate. And the very last one that I will be taking another 1 minute only, Dr. Kausar, I will not be taking uh, more than 1 minute. Very quickly, I am reflecting on the emergence of new middle class in Myanmar. I think that's very important. As a social science student, I see that, okay, it will have big impact on our geopolitical planning and geopolitical diplomatic relationship building, especially policy designing. Because a new middle class is emerging in Myanmar that did not emerge over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 decades for their economic stagnation. Now, with economic advancement and different types of inputs from different actors all over the world, this geopolitical economic interest, I tell deep interest, deep economics. Because of this deep economics, probably a strong middle class will emerge out of uh, Myanmar economy, and that might create, or that might create the possibility of a strong civil society as well. We need a strong civil society in all of these countries, especially in this region. Civil society people need to come out of their boxes. I believe at this moment we have taken quite long time to come out with very strong voices. And if we see that a new middle class is emerging in Myanmar, probably we'll be having a strong civil society as well. So there is a big prospect that civil society people needs to speak aloud about the problem and it's a possible solution. There is a big gap, big vacuum. It is our observation. As I have, Dr. Kausar and I worked hard to write that book, we noticed it very clearly that the civil society role is completely absent in this geopolitical scenario. And probably we need to think about that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hilal. So we are at the question and answer session, and I'll bring the first question up here, and that is addressed to Dr. Imtiaz. I think we have received a couple of more on the same line, and our audience, and of course, we are also very interested to have some more clear ideas how to create a safe zone. Who would be the initiator of such an idea, and what would be the platforms? Would it be the UN Security Council, as we all know how it operates, and where China is a permanent member up there? And do you have any model in mind, Dr. Imtiaz? For example, the latest Turkish venture in Syria, where they created a safe corridor, as they say. And most of the time, when we hear the word safe zone, it is kind of connected primarily with the military. I would say a limited intervention, and finally, would be the sovereignty of Myanmar will be in question when we raise such an idea. So, floor is yours, Dr. Imtiaz.
Thank you. Couple of things. One thing I did mention that Myanmar had in its pocket China, India, and Japan. Now, well, Riaz alluded a little bit of it. You see, the Galwan situation or post Galwan, there has been a little change with India. They have always, their foreign minister has also extended a kind of, a point on the issue of Myanmar, has talked to our foreign minister and saying that we would pursue, and this I'm saying in last 3-4 days, the development that has taken place, and this is after Galwan, because it's quite an irony that India and China are fighting, up in the north while they are together in Myanmar. It doesn't make any sense. So I think Galwan, somehow, I guess India realized that they have to be firm when it comes to China. I don't know how firm they can be, given the kind of relationship, the economic relationship they have, not to mention the number of students, the Indian students now, more Indian students now go to China than to UK since 2018. So if you look all those figures, it's difficult how BJP government will change all those in overnight. But, Galwan is one incident probably has changed a little bit because I think they found that Bangladesh will keep a equidistance. We are not going to side with this country or that country. Our relationship with both the countries are good. I would not think that we have tilted to one or the other. We have Bangladesh's foreign policy principle has been firm, and it is a 9 months, what you call, during the liberation war principle. It did not happen after liberation. It happened during the liberation, and that was friendship towards all, malice towards none. And that is the principle Bangladesh will continue. But with that kind of principle, I believe India understood very well that they are not going to get Bangladesh to its side when it comes to China. So what happens? So the move, now we see that I guess it's a late realization, but still a firm realization that they are keen on repatriation and they will try to use their office. Now we have to see whether the words match with deeds, and we have to see what movement they will do, because it's quite an irony that China and India are together when it comes to the Rohingya issue. Now, the safe zone, I think the second point that we need to keep in mind here, and this is where ICJ comes, Myanmar and Aung San Suu Kyi are on record that they are Arakanese Muslims. That's the term that they have used. So the scenarios, I understand, Riaz is a political scientist, so must come up with all kinds of scenarios I can understand. But, the very fact that they have agreed that they are Arakanese Muslim, that means they have to be in Arakan today or tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Only thing that they're now saying, because of the Arakan army, we can't take them back. They're not saying that they're not people of Myanmar. They're saying they're Arakanese Muslim, that they have not labeled them as Bengalis. They have not labeled them as any other term, but term that they've used. And as I say, at the highest legal body, and which is Arakanese Muslim, not to mention ICJ has used the term Rohingyas. So now that they have officially, legally, internationally used Arakanese Muslim, I hope the debate inside Myanmar will stop that they are not Bengalis. That's the popular discourse that goes on. So I think Ali Riaz's ideal is the practical one. I don't know why he is, well, Riaz can say why he's using the word ideal. That's the practical one, full stop. The other are, we can't consider. We can't consider resettlement or repatriation. It doesn't matter because you can't do that, particularly when Myanmar is saying that Arakan is Muslim. Why are we talking about reintegration? Why are we talking about resettlement? And from where does it come from? We just have to see how they will go back, because they are not saying they have signed 2 agreements. Let me also flag that. So far, after 2017, they have signed with us, where they have said they are going to repatriate. And the other agreement that they have signed is with the UNDP and UNHCR, where they have also committed that they will take back. So the discourse somewhere I see in some of the media, also in Bangladesh, that they will, stay back and etc. doesn't arise, because the legal instruments have been created by Myanmar itself, and that they are Arakan is Muslim, and this repatriation issue. Let me also flag another agreement that Bangladesh had with China when our Prime Minister visited China, the Xi Jinping Hasina declaration. If you see, it is clearly mentioned about the repatriation, to the point, and I want to use the word, and I'm quoting from the joint statement: China will offer its support in creating secure and conducive conditions for the return to Myanmar of the displaced people currently taking shelter in Bangladesh. Here you have China also. So the very, other scenarios, why are we making other scenarios and confusing people and confusing the Rohingyas? The point is, they have agreed that their Arakan is Muslim. We have to stick by that. And the point is how they will return. That is where the safe zone comes as a temporary measure. Why? Because Myanmar is saying we'll take them and we are not going to, put them in their original houses and all. Well, all those are burned in any way. We are going to put them in a temporary place. That is where we are saying, or I guess Bangladesh and a lot of other people are saying that safe zone is required, because this temporary phase is still they get the citizenship. They don't want to give the citizenship before, they want to give them after. Fine. We have no issue with that. The point here is, you don't expect after committing genocide, you invite them and the military which has committed genocide is waiting and they will all come back. Impossible. That is where we are saying, or some of us we are saying, it can be ASEAN. Well, ASEAN becomes more complex, so many countries, and it's not really, kind of an institution which can do things of that kind, but, maybe some ASEAN countries can do. But, let's bring China, let's bring India, let's bring Japan. It doesn't have to UN also, because UN can create another kind of fear in Myanmar. So you can have the new kind of force, and it doesn't have to be force, it can be officers and all, with the Myanmar military standing beside them, so that the Rohingyas can feel safe till the point they become equal citizens in Myanmar. So other scenarios are ruled out by ICJ. Other scenarios are ruled by Aung San Suu Kyi, and other scenarios are ruled out even the agreements that is coming from China and the joint agreement that we have with China. So that's the point. Now, two or three things, and I'll stop. Myanmar was never democratic. Why are we thinking that Myanmar can be democratic? They never had democracy. When did they have democracy? Way back, pre-1962, a little bit of it. Come on, they never had democracy. And to think that one person can make democracy, I will request, those who have not read the book of the grandson of UN Secretary General U Thant, Thant Minh Tu, The Hidden History of Burma. I would request all of you, in fact, who have not read it, please read this gentleman's book. It's enormously powerful, powerful book. To the point, he's arguing why Aung San Suu Kyi is giving hint. I would not say that, he makes it absolutely clear, but, enough words to say why Aung San Suu Kyi is listening to the military. Who is using who? That much you will find it in this particular book. So my argument here would be there was never a democracy in Myanmar. To think that there will be democracy in Aung San Suu Kyi's lifetime, this is something even, Bangladesh, we have a longer history of genocide, longer history of course, genocide, but longer history of democracy. Our democracy goes back to Gopal, Please remember, or even the Lichavi dynasty of the 6th century, there was a republican form of government in Greater Bengal. People forget this Bengal is not 1971. Yes, we had a cartographical massacre because of the British. Bengal got divided into West Bengal and then Assam out, the Bihar and Orissa out. We had a cartographical massacre, but our roots with democracy is much older than 71. Gopal was elected, for God's sake. Lichavi dynasty, they were all elected republicans. So my argument here is Myanmar cannot show that. We are a much older civilization than what Myanmar is all about. So my argument here is safe zone is a temporary measures. There's no reason why it is. It's quite a practical issue. Now, suppose the safe zone, and I think something of the fifth scenario, I didn't hear, I missed a little bit of words on the last one. But let me tell you about Bangladesh. We are 160 million people. We are the 7th largest in terms of population. There are more Bengalis, Bangladeshis than Russians. Let me also flag that, okay? Now, this Bangladesh is the only country in South Asia which had a liberation war of the kind, one talks about, liberation war, where you have the civilian and the military shaking hands and fighting a war. India did not have that. Well, Subhash Bose tried to do that, but that was not the India we got. So India did not have a liberation war. Pakistan never had liberation war. Sri Lanka never had liberation war. And I don't want to talk the rest of the South Asian countries. Bangladesh is the only country which had phase 2 genocide, 1947 and 71, both were genocide. Not to mention, we also faced this one, which was not our genocide, but we are suffering from it. But the point that I'm trying to make here is if Bangladesh wants to, or if Bangladesh wants to be dirty, it can be dirty. If it wants to mess around, it can mess around. Don't forget, there is something called in Bangladesh, a kind of, Bangladesh is empathize, is very sensitive to sufferings. We have historically, civilizationally being sensitive to sufferings. And look at our sufferings. If you are from Dhaka University, you will know. Dhaka University have protested all the movements that you see in the world, whether it's South Africa, whether it is Rwanda, name anything, you will see Bangladeshi students. Let me tell you also another incident people have forgotten. In independent Bangladesh after 71, the first time when students were killed by the police or police firing, why were they killed? Why were they shot? The first time 2 students died, and that was because of anti-Vietnam War. Let me make it very clear. So when I was told by the Foreign Ministry office that Vietnam is not supporting us, I said, come on. How many Burmese died because of the Vietnam War? It is Bangladeshis too. And I said you should make an annual event in Vietnam that 2 Bangladeshis died during Vietnam War or fight anti-Vietnam War. First time students died, not for any issues on Bangladesh. That was later, we had a lot of killings, no doubt about it. But the first 2 killings happened because of Vietnam War. Please do not forget that. Now, that's why I'm saying, if Bangladesh or if Bangladeshis want to be messed around, and we have done it in fact, look at our, kind of relationship or the problem that some of us created in Northeast with the ULFA. It was just empathizing with them. Now that's a horrible empathizing, because whole Ulfa is anti-Bengali. Now this was the funniest part. I could never understand why Bangladeshis would support Ulfa. Ulfa, he was, was an anti-Bengali, but still, though they were anti-Bengali, they thought, okay, since, they are suffering, let us support them. So the problem that will happen in future, you will find, forget Rohingyas, I'm telling you, Bangladeshis will be there telling the Rohingyas, I will help you. Don't forget, Bangladeshis also went up to Afghanistan. There where Bangladeshis went up to Kashmir. You see, this has always been there. We are 7th largest country in the world. Our body language has not become 7th largest. We still think we are 56,000 square miles. That's the problem. We still think the cartographical massacre that we suffered at the hands of the British, we think that Bengal is the oldest civilization. So from that point of view, I think what Riaz was pointing at, the first one, is not an ideal one. That's the practical one. When we must pursue, we must tell the Japanese, since they have a civil society, if Abe is not listening, and I see no reason why he should listen, but there is a civil society, we should get into the civil society there. In India, now with the Galwan, they're changing a little bit. There's a civil society in India. If you can get Japan and India on your side, or on the side of the Rohingyas, there's no reason why China would not. Look at China. When it came first time to Bangladesh after Rohingya, and the foreign ministry's declaration that they gave, clearly the 3 points agreement, believe it or not, 3 points agreement matches with the 5-point agreement of our Prime Minister, and not to mention also the Kofi Annan Commission report. The Chinese one-to-one will always say that Myanmar is not listening to us. And here I want to bring the Arakan army. I don't want to go into the details. Please, China has more hands. They have more cards in their hands, and they can use it. The point is, are we pushing them in the right direction? If we can't make Japan and India, if Japan and India wants to enter Myanmar and displace China, as Ali Riaz was trying to say also, China will stay put. That will not go. So we need to impress upon the civil society. We can't go to China to do that. It's a different kind of a structure altogether. So here is India, a democratic India, a big civil society. Here is Japan, a democratic Japan, a big civil society. I think that is where we need to go. We also need to bring Europe. It's only, this is the interesting part, only Netherlands, unfortunately, and after the provisional measures, some of the European countries supported the provisional measures, but not Gambia. I think that is where also we must work. And who will work? The diaspora. And that's the reason I agreed to come to Kausar's, this talk show. Normally, I try to avoid a little bit of this, because of the time measure. But when Kausar approached me, and well, I have some relationship with Canada, not to mention, as I said, Canada is very much on. This is where I think the diaspora needs to work. This is where we need to campaign. As much the campaign that India did back in 71. Look at the campaign that India and the diaspora did back in 71. That is kind of, structure we need. So I am hopeful. There is no way Myanmar can get out of a genocide. If Myanmar gets out of a genocide, believe it or not, you are going to get much, much messier world. And I'm sure we are not looking for a world of that kind. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Imtiaz, for your passionate arguments. Let me bring Dr. Ali Riaz here. Yes, you are in here, sir. But let me set this one first. Of course, sir, you are free to comment on Dr. Imtiaz's observations. But also, we would like to hear from you, sir, about China and its influence on Tatmadaw. And also, I just wanted to add from my moderation, the capacity capacity as a moderator, that you live and work in USA. So, what do you see if there is any hope post-election this year? Would there be any significant change of America towards in the southeast part and also Myanmar? Floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Let me try to respond to the allegations or misunderstanding of Professor Imtiaz Ahmed with respect to my 5 scenarios. It seems that he has an inclination against the scenarios. My point was this, plain and simple. There are 5 options. Which one do you prefer? The ideal one. right? Is it going to happen tomorrow? It hasn't happened for 3 years. The safe zone idea from 2017, I've been arguing, and I wrote about it. I said the safe zone can be established without United Nations, with Red Cross, if the government has pursued. Thanks to Bangladesh government. Prime Minister put out this proposal, and then the Bangladesh Foreign Ministry took a different route altogether, completely different route. Has Bangladesh ever pushed for this safe zone? Safe zone could have been established in 2017. At least the idea could have been pushed when Prime Minister brought it out. And then, if Bangladesh government pursued under the Red Cross, UN scheme, we understand. We are not stupid. We understand that UN without the Chinese, without the Russians, you cannot go. So, but through the Red Cross and involving China through negotiation, the Bangladesh had leverage and still has leverage with China. If they really want to do it, do they? I mean, on paper they do. Thanks, great, absolutely. Imtiaz has enormous confidence on the piece of paper than I have. Maybe it is because he's in Dhaka and he has more access to those papers than I have. But the fact remains, in 3 years, what happened? Did this bilateral agreement resulted a single individual moved? No, it didn't. So my point is that you're left with 5 options, and the other 4 are devastating. And each and every case, if you have listened, I said what are the downsides of this. I'm not exactly trying to confuse anybody. My job is to put out on the table what are the options. These are the 5 options you have. Can there be more? Possibly there can be more. I don't know. That's my limitation. But I see 5 possible, route to this, and that's why I started with the one. Is it the only one? No, it is not the only one. Is it the ideal one? Yes, it is. Is it the real one? It is going to. Professor Ahmed has confidence that it is going to happen. Of course, maybe I don't know. Tomorrow? No, it's not going to happen tomorrow. In a year, I don't see that one. If you want me to believe that it is going to happen 6 months, I'm sorry, I cannot agree with that. So the point is that in order to have the first one, that is my second point, the R2P. Safe zone idea, R2P. What is the R2P? R2P is, in this case, under the Red Cross, you can marshal a group of countries, including China, Japan, India. And Helal Mohidin talked about ASEAN. That is impossible. Impossible. ASEAN would not talk about any specific country bilateral issues. No, they don't. They never did. Malaysia tried, it didn't work, actually put a difficult spin into it. So my scenarios are not trying to confuse anybody, unless someone wants to be confused. The point is that with this kind of situation, there's only one option. And the one option is the return, right? If the return how can it be done? It's not going to happen overnight with 1982 being removed, and Myanmar is not going to. It's a genocidal state. It is a genocidal state. It is not going to, just because Aung San Suu Kyi said something in ICJ, something, they're trying to whitewash the whole thing by putting 3 or 4 army officers on the dock. That is what they're doing. Do I have to believe that they're going to do something different? My confidence in Myanmar regime, particularly Myanmar's genocidal army, is less than anybody else here, unfortunately. They might have other things, but I don't believe they're going to do it. Since 62, they have been in power. They have enormous economic interest in Rakhine, and they're going to do that one. Now, how do you push? Is Aung San Suu Kyi going to do it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If Aung San Suu Kyi is not doing it, who is going to do it? And if Bangladesh thinks that having a conversation with the Tatmadaw, the 3 separate troops with Myanmar's military, is going to solve the problem behind the scene, it's not. It is not. It is a genocide perpetrated by a state and its military in connivance with the civilian leadership, who either turned their blind eye or actually helped it. Aung San Suu Kyi should be held accountable for that too. Perhaps we are demanding too much because we don't know how much she was involved. But A civilian administration which turned a blind eye to a genocide needs to be held accountable. And that is my point, that there are 5 options. And other 3 options are not going to work out because each and every time I said there are downsides. I mentioned about land. I mentioned about the community. The point is, if you do not pursue the first one through the second option that I say, you will end up with those 3 scenarios. It's not going to stay there. 2017 and 2020, 3 years have passed. 1.2 million people have still here. The first day, on the very first day, didn't we say that that's the only solution, that they will have to go back? I know that is the only solution. Did it happen in the last 3 years? Did Bangladesh succeeded? No. And I'm bringing up the Prime Minister's proposal time and again for one reason, from the very first day when Prime Minister proposed, even before that. And I'm not taking credit for that. This is my humble opinion, that I thought that's the way, that the safe zone is the way. And safe zone through Red Cross is the way. Through UN, you won't be able to. And it is not a militarized safe zone we are talking about. Protection, if necessary, that would be provided by not the United Nations, but either through the Japan, China, and if necessary, India, can brought in. If Myanmar feels, or for that matter, Bangladesh feels that there should be another party to it, India and China has sufficient enough forces and wherewithal to have this kind of safe zone. They can do it. They have the money, they have the capacity, they can do it. Will they do it? Why will they do it? Tell me, why will they do it? Until they actually get something out of Bangladesh. Unfortunately, I'm a realist. Now, I can be idealist. That doesn't work, unfortunately. Unfortunately, 1.2 million people have faced a refugee situation. Unfortunately, a genocide has been committed. I'm not going to be dwelling on this, US government's or the West's idea in 2016 that democracy would drop because Aung San Suu Kyi has risen. Their idea was that at least we can do this much so that gradually it go there. And they left all the bearings, all the leverage they left, they gave they withdrew the sanctions. They had no supervision, nothing whatsoever, and that gave a very clear signal to Kathmandu. I saw one question: that why China would be succeeded in Kathmandu, influencing Kathmandu? Because China is the only supporter of Kathmandu from 62 to 2016, when nobody was there, absolutely none. And the relationship, I started saying at the beginning that the relationship between Myanmar and China is largely Kathmandu PLA relationship. I disagree with Hilal Muhyiddin that the 300 million, middle class emergence would actually resulted in a civil society. No, it doesn't. I'm not that optimistic. Call me pessimistic, because they are product of this system, a very exclusionary, to a certain extent racist, highly nationalist system has produced 300 million middle class. I'm not saying everyone is going to be like that, but the culture which produced this kind of middle class might not actually be a good civil society. Civil society can be very uncivil too. Uncivil behavior of civil society. We have seen that one. Just on paper it says civil society, does not make it as a civil society. That doesn't make it civil. So going back to this point, that what are the options? Options blatantly, it actually resides with Bangladesh to work on. We may take, we may be surprised, but we should be shocked as well that it was Gambia who had to go. Why not Bangladesh? You can say that, at that point you become realist that Bangladesh has this relationship with India. We were trying to have this bilateral negotiation. We shouldn't have gone to ICG because ICG doesn't have an instrument. If we go there, we are shutting the door for the bilateral negotiation. I understand that. I get it. I truly get it. But the point is that just because a piece of paper has been written somewhere, and Myanmar is going to, respect that one, this is called leap of faith. Unfortunately, faith is something that is, in short supply nowadays. And that's why there are 5 potential solutions. And the sixth, what I said, is these 5 are rocking the boat. The sixth one is the wrecking the boat, meaning that whether Myanmar, where the Rohingyas can be a leverage point for Bangladesh-China relationship. I don't know. Is that a weird idea? It is out of the box idea. But has that happened? It has happened. When I talked about integration and other, I've shown every bit of problems. But those are default options. Let us not forget. Fact is that Rohingya people are sipping into the Bangladeshi, in outside the camp. We have seen the instances of, thanks to this, corrupt criminal network of providing passport. And this is a corrupt criminal network of providing passport to Rohingya community who have left Bangladesh. It's happening. We can turn out, shut our eyes and say it's not happening because on paper it doesn't, not supposed to happen. It is happening. So integration in that sense is actually happening. And having those, and then we haven't talked about the security dimension of it. I'm opposed to securitization of refugee crisis, whether it is Syrian or the Rohingyas or the Palestinians or somewhere else. But there's a security dimension. When everyone started talking in 2017, erroneously, that ARSA is an outfit of ISIS, I am one of the very few who stood by and said, no, it's not. Because they wanted to make a big thing out of it so that they can actually show that it is Islamist militancy and henceforth this needs an international. It's a humanitarian crisis. It's a crisis with respect to the rights of citizens within Myanmar. They happen to be Muslim. Does not make them that you'll have to tie them in with ISIS and then the security and these and that. Whatever the video you have seen from Indonesia should not actually direct you to say that everyone in Rohingyas are actually becoming the potential terrorists. You and I can be terrorists if we are in a despair, hopelessness for years, and my family is suffering, and my family before that have suffered. It is possible. That does not make only Rohingyas as specifically prone to the militancy, does it? No. Does all Palestinians have become, or all Syrians have become, or all these or that have become? No, it doesn't. That kind of blanket, irresponsible statements have been made in 2017. I was not one of them. I tried to. So, in similar understanding, at this point, where unless we understand that, the geopolitical dimension, the geostrategic dimension, why China is doing what China is doing, we'll have to understand that China is doing for this. So we'll have to be as close to their interests, protecting, what we are trying to say, what Bangladesh's interest is. How can we come close and let, to come up with a solution? Is China going to give away Myanmar because suddenly they have realized that it is an inhuman act? China itself is committing a huge human rights violation by Uyghur population. And we are expecting that suddenly China would become magnanimous enough to protect the Rohingyas. You can think. Nobody is stopping dreaming. They can dream of it. The point is, does that mean we should shun China? No, you cannot shun. Reality is that China is an actor. Bangladesh will have to work with it. Find ways. Default scenarios are 3. First scenario is the now unlikely but ideal. That is, I call it ideal. That is the solution that you'll have to reach to. It's not going to happen. That's why the second scenario, R2P, safe zone, under Red Cross, with the protection from China, India, and other countries for a period that could extend years and continue to have a political solution based on Kofi Annan report. Kofi Annan report doesn't mention Rohingya. That is true. We'll praise Kofi Annan report, but we will also take into account that Kofi Annan report doesn't mention Rohingya. Let us not forget that one. Until ICG, the Rohingya word was never used in an official document. Thanks to Gambia that they brought it in. I concur with Professor Imtiaz Ahmed. The Netherlands and Canada stood by. Thanks to them, their leadership. Canada has been playing a very good role. So with all these things, reality on ground is this. If you do not act, already it is late. If you do not act, you will end up with the three other scenarios. My point is, to make the ideal, go for the second scenario, and possibly what I call a wreck the board thing. If there is a possibility, if there is what doesn't agree with me, Bangladesh is tilting in one direction or another. Bangladesh is already tilted towards India. That has been the case, at least for a decade, more than that. Now, whether they would do it, it's up to them. I'm not in a position, but is that a possibility? If Bangladesh decide to tilt, can they use it? Maybe they would. I don't know. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ali Riaz. I would like to request Dr. Imtiaz to have a final comments on this topic because it seems it's very interesting, and we have both the realist ideas on the floor as well as idealist ideas competing each other. And I think we are receiving a lot of feedback from our audiences. They are very eager to know. I mean, they have listened, both of you, and they just want to know the last words. So, what do you think about the ultimate resolution of it if China cannot be dissuaded? Because Dr. Ali Riaz is very right. The Uyghur persecution is all over the media now, and we all are aware of these things. So, what is the common ground, Dr. Imtiaz, here?
Thank you. I think my understanding of the word, maybe we are having some miscommunication with the word option. You see, when Ali Riaz was using the option, for me, options are always workable. We can't have an option which is non-starter. That one, my argument is, we should not bring options which are not workable. It's something like back in 71, if somebody would have said that people, 10 million refugees would go back with Pakistan army in Dhaka, I would say that's not an option. Or 10 million refugees would settle in India, because their population is 1 billion. Why not take them 10 million more? That's not an option. That maybe we are having a communication gap, but he has clarified his point, and I take it. And I say, and I think the number one is the real one. Now, how do we go about doing it? Now, nothing happens unless you shout, and nothing happens unless you put pressure. And this is where I think the global diaspora needs to work. And this is, I think, the work of Kausar is very important. Though Canada may be what you call on the side of the Rohingyas, but we need to bring other countries in. So how do you go about? You keep writing, you keep all these webinars, you keep focus. There should be, I think, a webinar on Japan. Why aren't we having, why aren't we bringing, now that you don't have to spend so much money at all? You can get in touch with some of the Japanese policymakers and the Japanese pro-Rohingya group. There's a Rohingya Association in Tokyo. They should be brought in. What is happening. Similarly, you should bring in the Indian civil society, and including the fantastic human rights activists that India has. Arundhati Roy, is one of the big names, but you have very big names in India. So what I'm saying that you need to keep the campaign and continue harping on till Myanmar blinks. I see no reason why Myanmar should not blink, because as you have seen that Aung San Suu Kyi went all the way to Hague, thinking that there will be a split vote. I think that was their strategy, probably, that somehow her face would be important, and that would change some of the judges' equation. But you can't do that. You look at the system, and I'm not trying to say that the paper paper is important. They always say that pen is mightier than the sword. Don't forget. And Ali Riaz, I was quite surprised because all he does is writing. Is one of those prolific writer. So I think his words are writing is very important. The text is important. The text is already there, which clearly says that they are Arakanese Muslim. You may not use the word Rohingya. Well, ICJ has used the Rohingya. So I'm trying to show the development that it's not like resettlement is an option, because that is not what the Rohingya, what the Myanmar government is saying. So why should I take that as option? So, but I think there was a communication gap in the word option. So for me, options are workable. But 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. Those are not options. I would stick to that. Now, my last word would be, I think this time, since there is a credible evidence, even the independent reports that have come up, UN-led different reports, the Human Rights Commission's report, if you see, all have made it clear that there has been a genocidal intent, and that ICJ should take up. And look at the, ICJ has never worked so quickly giving the provisional measures. We never thought that the provisional measures would come so quickly. We thought it would take even a year or so, but then it came very quickly. So we don't know what the final verdict would be. We don't know what ICC, it has also worked. Yes, pandemic has slowed down. Now what we need to do is, given the technology that we have, we need to bring ASEAN country, we need to bring Japan. And I think, since Kausar and Hilal have worked on it, they need to pursue this as much as Ali Riaz, who's sitting in the United States, convince as much as possible throughout the world that, look, this is an historic case where you have a genocide, and this regime is absolutely, nobody is, giving the attention, mainly because of the business interest. It can't be that bad. Now, this is one stateless people who have suffered a hidden genocide way from 1940s, or even some people will say even earlier, but let's take it, 1948 and definitely after 1962. Now, this time, and this is very important, this time the number of conferences that have taken place on the Rohingyas, because I've been working on the Rohingyas, absolutely from 90s onwards, and I have never seen so many conferences in Cologne, in Berlin, in Kuala Lumpur, you name one after another. That, I think, is the strength. Look at the number of books that have come out on the Rohingyas. Look at it. Believe it or not. Never in the last 20 years, and if you take last 5 years, match it up and see the number of books that even Kausar and Hilal's book. What I'm trying to point out here, this is a new kind of a structure. We must keep the pressure on. And the only way the pressure on is for all of us who are here, Mazharul, Ali Riaz, Kausar, Hilal, all must really push for the idea whenever that is a possibility. Rohingyas and the pandemic, Rohingyas and, keep on pointing why the Japanese investment and some of the figures that Ali Riaz has given. Let us bring them out. Let us bring those companies, call the CEOs, let them defend why they are investing. In the Western world, that is what, I think is easy to do in the Western world. I understand China is difficult. I'm not, but how will China blink also? The China will blink when we'll see that there is a global pressure. And as I said, China has more cards, that they can use. I don't know when and how they will use, but more India, Japan, and other countries, Singapore, they try to invest more there. I think that is where we need to knock and knock seriously. I see the global effort in a much more bigger way this time than in the 70s and the 90s. Believe it or not, 70s, nothing was there. And I will end by saying this, because somebody has raised the question, if it is possible in 78 and 92. Don't forget, twice in history and in our living history, twice Myanmar took them back. Twice. So it's not an impossibility. It's not something that we are trying to say that we have been idle, why Myanmar would change. No. They are getting away with that. mainly because some of these countries are not as much attentive as they were before. Why? Because in the 70s and 90s, only China was with them. None of the other countries were there. And let me give you some of the anecdotal. I don't have evidence, so don't push me on that. In the 1978 and 1982, don't forget, we had different kind of government. This is for the first time, actually, Awami League is facing refugees. The two earlier times, debate on how Awami League would handle it. And in other time, the first time in 1971, it was a military government, okay? And the anecdotal is this, the story is this. The general said, okay, if they don't take them back, we will give them AK-47, quote unquote. And they took them back. So options are always there. Now, what happened in 1992? Similarly, they wouldn't take it back. Then the UN system and said, look, you want to open up, unless you take them back, we are not going to allow you in all those things that you want. You be a global actor. Sorry, we can't do that. And they took them back. So twice they took them back. And the very fact that they took them back is also, I think, gives quite a credence that, that they are residents of Myanmar. But that, I think, history is no longer required, or that evidence is no longer required, mainly because Myanmar has said and is repeatedly saying that their Arakan is Muslim. Of course, they're not using the word Rohingyas. Privately, they do. Aung San Suu Kyi now privately, when she talks with even leaders, and I've heard from a person who have attended one-to-one meeting also that she uses the word Rohingya. But I understand will take time. But the very fact that they are using the word Arakan is Muslim means that they are coming from. So all other scenarios are not there. What we need to do is build pressure so that Myanmar will not give this excuse of Arakan army, will not give the excuse of the pandemic and COVID-19 pandemic and all those things, and will try to bring them. But how that can be done, that is where we're saying a temporary measure of safe zone is the best way out. But believe it or not, without pressure, and I agree with Ali Riaz, unless we put pressure on all fronts, and this is where I think the work of Kausar, Ali Riaz, Mazharul, Halal, all are important, and we need to have more Kausar and Halals. That's the point I'm trying to argue. Unless we do that, if we start building other scenarios, other options, even if we say those are not workable, I think we are not putting enough pressure. Then Myanmar will start thinking, oh, Professor Ali Riaz is saying there are 3-4 other options. They will try to delete the first two, let me tell you, and take the third and fourth and quote Ali Riaz that the professor of Illinois State University said, resettlement. Totally out of the context they will put. That is what I'm saying we ought not to do. We should stick to the one that is practicable, and that I think will bring justice to the issue, particularly the justice to the Rohingyas.
My point is, Imtiaz, is that if the Bangladesh government doesn't understand that the default options are the rest of the three, at the end of the day, and particularly when I'm saying the integration, that is the default. If you don't do anything, and the lethargic move, what Mazhar has described as a soft diplomacy, I don't know how soft can they be, but nevertheless they have been soft. That's my point. And when I say the piece of paper that
Ali Riaz, just quickly because we learned, Ali Riaz, I am not speaking as a government person. I'm not a spokesperson of the government. I even don't care what the government does. I am doing as a civilian from the day one you have seen, right from...
No. Why you thought I'm talking that you are...
I'm coming. There is something called civil society, and I take it in a big way. Okay, there is something called non-governmental. There is something called Kauthar, Hilal, and Ali Riaz and Mazharul. None of you are in the government. Myself, you're not government. Let government do whatever it like. They were not even agreeing to ICJ, believe it or not. If you want, I can sit one-to-one and tell they were not even interested in ICJ. They're not even in the ICC. We literally had to have conference after conference, workshop after workshop. Those who are in Dhaka would know. And then they said, okay, fine. And that's precisely the reason I ended up at the Hague. So point I'm saying, the government has its own compulsion. Government has its own hard, soft, what kind of diplomacy. I am not interested in those things, mainly because you and I can actually push the government also to go farther. That is what I'm saying. Start working, try to get the investors, try to get the diaspora, and this is something we are going to do. If you are interested, you can come and join in the month of August. Again, Center for Genocide Studies, BRAC University, and Action Aid. We are going to bring the entire diaspora, 15 to 16 countries, researchers and the Rohingyas from all these countries in a Zoom conference so that we can have a sense of what this diaspora is doing. We need to work on these, blaming this and that. I can understand, we are we are Dhaka College friends, and we have traveled a lot together in university. We know how the government is. So my point here is, let us build the strength that we have. And I think we have tremendous strength because the Bangladeshi diaspora also is a big diaspora. Let's face it. This is where our strength lies. The technology now helps us. I don't think we need fund as much as it was required before. We need to use those funds, build pressure, and then I'm positive they are going to blink. That is what history tells us.
That's fine. I mean, my point is, I don't know why you thought that I'm implying that you are representing government. You and I, and of course, I don't represent. I know you don't. Of course, if we had decided in our younger life to represent government, we could have in a different direction in our life. So we know that. But my point is that the Bangladesh government needs to understand there are default options which are not good for Bangladesh. Bangladesh has to protect its own interest, and that interest lies with not resettlement, not with other things, because if you really want to solve this situation, and I try to avoid the word crisis because it has a other connotation to it. My point is the government needs to take that step that and you mentioned, yes, I know to some extent, less than you, of course, the government's position with respect to ICC, ICJ were not very conducive, and this is the point. This is the point. Why would not they do it? Why keep on pushing? Yes, of course, if not before, definitely since 2017, on many occasions, whatever opportunities came, I brought that up. That the point is that the Bangladeshi state need to be more proactive than reactive to it, whether it is reacting to Bangladeshi civil society or reacting to what Myanmar is doing. And when I'm talking about a piece of paper, I'm talking about a piece of paper with respect to the agreement between Bangladesh and Myanmar. They're rushing to that. They shouldn't have. Bangladesh could have actually played this whole thing, that they could dangle it in front of Myanmar for months and say, unless you do this, unless you do this, unless you do this, we are not going to sit with you. And that dangling would have helped to get more concessions out of them. At the end of the day, you'd have to have an agreement with the parties concerned, right? I mean, it is, however international frame that you take, Myanmar is the country that they will have to take back the Rohingyas because they're the Myanmarese citizen. The point, and hence this is my point, that this R2P safe zone, R2P broad R2P idea needs to be used to create safe zone. And someone I see that asked why Red Cross, the person suggested MSF. So be it. So be it. My point is, why Red Cross and MSF? Because it is not UN. Because if you go through UN, you have a very difficult situation. You won't get there. But with Red Cross, you can get there. Bring up the force. That is the line has to pursue. States needs to be very much robustly with that. That is what is lacking. That is what 2017 through 2020 Bangladeshi state has failed. The government has failed.
Thank you, sir. We are just trying to get to the close of the event today. Before I get into the final round, what we call last words, let me bring in Dr. Mazhar, who was patiently watching all these high politics, high IR theories in the sideline. So, Dr. Mazhar, the question to you came in this way, and I know it's a very contested ideas, but we just wanted to know from audience's perspective as well. What do you think is the vibe in Bangladesh society, or let's say Bangladesh civil society in general? Do you think there is something changing over these past 3 years?
But thank you. First of all, I was hopelessly hopeful, and then hopefully hopeless, and then I'm now hopefully hopeful. I mean, that's I mean, we always need to see the brighter side. I mean, that's. I mean, so if we see the brighter side, first of all, there is no question of kind of so-called integration. I mean, the permanent integration. Of course, we need some sort of integration or assimilation, you can call it, or acculturation, or whatever the terminology is. We can get there, but there is no point of that permanent kind of a assimilation into the land of Bangladesh by the Myanmar population or the Rohingya population. That's pretty clear. I mean, that's not an option. Well, so the option is what Professor Ali Riaz is saying, return. I think that's a good word than reputation. But that's also a difficult word. So I mean, return is the only option. Now returning through safe zone or returning through some other ways. I mean, as through diplomatic. I mean, effort through. I mean, return is the only option. There is no other option. From a Bangladeshi kind of a, I mean, the question that you have asked, that what is the development? I see a little bit of reluctance from the government side nowadays, and also, frankly speaking, from the civil society side. It's kind of a little bit of reluctance at the moment. So we need to synergize our effort in all levels.
Thank you
That's
so
all I
much.
can say.
Dear audience, we are at the last part of our session today. As I said, we part of the tradition of CRRIC webinars. We go around and for the last time, we request the panelists to have their last words. So now I would be requesting Dr. Imtiaz first to have his last words, followed by Dr. Riaz and Dr. Mazhar. Your last words, sir.
Thank you. No, as I said, I understand government has its own compulsions, and I speak from experience. And I'm sure those who have read some of my works, I'm attached to Tagore or Rabindranath so much that the famous line which Gandhi also made very popular. If no one hits your call, go alone. Jodi to dakshine kyo na ashe ekla cholo re. So I believe in that. I believe in the power of the person. My democracy is power of the person, not institutions. And my understanding of democracy goes back to civilization and not to Western democracy. So the point here is I speak from experience. And back in 1971, I was just a class 9 student. I did not wait for what Mujib Sarkar or government, exiled government was saying, or this saying. I left my parents and went to Agartala. And then that's what it is. You jump and no. There were a lot of scenarios, believe it or not. A lot of scenarios were there. We stood to the point. And I think I can almost bet that in July, we were sure that a new country is coming up. There's no question about it. I was a student of residential model school. I went only twice. One to know who will join with me to go to Agartala, and the next time to finalize that, and telling all of the students, you're wasting your time. A new country is coming up. Now, so I speak from experience. So I understand the compulsions of the government. Blaming the government would not help. And this is what has happened even with the government that we are talking about. As I said, back in the August, September, October, they were absolutely on bilateral issue. And from day one, I had one-to-one, and it's on record. I think it was Ekattu TV with the foreign secretary, with the former foreign secretary, and one-to-one. And I said, sorry, this time it's you can't do it bilaterally, mainly because it's a genocide. Simple as that. And I think later realization came, and things change, and we were approached and saying that okay, let's talk about ICJ, let's talk about ICC. So I think what we can do, it's not blaming. You try to bring the way out and get the job done, even if the government is not interested. I'm not into that. I think if you believe that this is the right way to do that, one should pursue it, and one should pursue it where you are. Bring the entire world to you. This is the best time. You can bring all the friends that you have cultivated throughout your life, bring them all on board and try to argue, as I try to do with my Chinese friends, with my Indian friends, with my Japanese friends, and they realize. And that's precisely the reason we could bring some of the discussions and try to impress upon the respective governments. That is the way I think the approach should be. So I understand it is a tough, hard nut to crack, but believe it or not, there's a saying, the more the hard the crack is, it's easier to crack, provided you know where to put the pressure. A hard nut is easy to crack, provided you know where to put the pressure. We need to find that, and this is the work that we need to do. And as I say, the technology allows us to do that. We should not wait. We should bring as much as pressure and shame those investors who are investing, to the point, make them understand what would be the consequence if Myanmar is laid off, or if some of the generals who have done. It's not the whole of Myanmar. I have good friends in Myanmar. I visited several times, and I have good number of friends. I meet them often. Well, now with the pandemic, I can't. But in Bangkok, in Cologne, I met them. They're wonderful people. Even the son of the first president is a good friend, well, based in UK though, but it's still a pro-Rohingya person. So there are Burmese, Buddhist Burmese who are pro-Rohingya. So it's not whole of Myanmar which is bad. That's what I'm trying to argue. Let us get into it. Let us bring them on the table, wherever you are, whether in the Canada or US or in Bangladesh or India, doesn't matter. Let us work and solve this problem, because it is a human problem. So I don't want to, blame UN and UNHCR. They have their limitations. I know, I work with them, and they have their own limitations, but that should not stop me from doing what we are working on. That should not stop Mazharul or Kausar, others. Let UN have his own limitation. My point is, we need to work together and build pressure. Once we do that, I'm sure Myanmar will understand, and China also will understand, and that's the way to move forward. I'll stop.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I do agree with Imtiaz, building pressures. And my point is, Bangladesh being affected the most, I expect Bangladesh to do if I was in Bangladesh, or whether even if I am not in Bangladesh, I'm putting that pressure on Bangladesh for what? Because so that I don't have to go to Gambia for doing things. 1.2 million Rohingyas are in Bangladesh. And since it is in Bangladesh, it is incumbent on Bangladesh. And that is my point of supply. Why so rush? Why Bangladesh rushed into an agreement when this government had an option? It had an option. They didn't know, it's not the point. At the highest level, they knew the solution. That's why the pressure is. I'm not going to, it's not a blame thing. It is reminding them their responsibility. And that's my job. I think at least my job. Maybe I'm wrong. That this is my job to remind them that this is your task. Whether it's UN, if UN is failing, yes, international community has failed Rohingyas. Shouldn't I tell them? Of course I will tell them that you have failed the Rohingyas, so that next time they don't. It's not a blame thing. It is a reminder to Bangladesh government that it is as Imtiaz has mentioned, it is not 78, it's not 92, it's not 2012. It's a genocide. It's not a bilateral issue anymore. Those are the things. That is what I think that needs to be that. Otherwise, the situation is going to get out of the hand in the sense that default solutions are very, ominous for everybody. So work for the ideal solution, and the ideal solution, there is a pathway to the ideal solution. Ideal solution is distant, but there is a pathway to it. That pathway is the one that ought to be safe zone and working, and that needs to be led by Bangladesh. Let us not expect that someone from Africa or that matter, suddenly Indian civil society would convince India to do so. It is not going to be. If Bangladeshis cannot convince Bangladesh government and Bangladeshi state to do it, why should we expect that my friend in Myanmar will be successful? Okay, that's where I stop. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mazhar, please.
Well, I would say at the end of the day, it needs to be done by a very political way. So our the campaign and the consensus that have been emphasized over the time was basically we need to do it both way. We need to also work as a pressure group for the government to be more proactive, and also international proaction or the pressure group. We can synergize the effort of the human rights activists and all others like Arundhati Rai and all others to make it more intensify the campaign. And it's easier now in COVID situation. I mean, there are little opportunities that has provided by COVID-19 is that webinar thing or kind of thing that you need to travel that much, but you can synergize your effort. So one thing that we can do, and then second thing that I will say, as long as they're there, the Rohingya population, we need to behave them with honor and dignity. I mean that because as long as they're there, we think that we need to behave ourselves with them, because that will speak of our own dignity. So at this point, these are the 2 points I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear audience, we have heard very passionate and thought-provoking ideas from esteemed panelists, and you are aware of the research works and experience of all the three panelists so far, and they spoke from their experiences. They spoke from their huge work in the field of international relations, political science, and all these relevant aspects of dynamics of international conflict. So let's hope for the best. And dear audience, echoing with Dr. Imtiaz's voices today here, Conflict and Resilience Research Institute is doing its best with its limited capacity to build a consensus, to build allies in Canada and UK and Europe, so that this discussion is alive. And Canada has done, I would say, a good amount of job in supporting the idea and also pushing forward the human rights angle of this whole crisis so far. But unfortunately, as you know, state has different ideas and ways of working. The things are not much in Canadian radar nowadays. So this is why we are trying to do our part so that the discussion is alive and people are aware of the implications of the crisis for the longer term, as you know. So once again, on behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, I must thank you for your presence, for your stimulated discussion today, and I'm sure it will generate a lot of ideas amongst the audience, those who listen in today. And I'm trying to give you a very brief statistics now. Over these 2 hours and 43 minutes, we had consistently over 32 viewers logged in into our system to watch full or part of your discussion. And so it's tremendous that we have attentions on this topic. And once again, from Winnipeg, Canada, thank you very much, Dr. Ali Riaz, Dr. Imtiaz, Dr. Mazharul, and last but not least, Dr. Hilal Mohiuddin tuning in all the way from Dhaka, and it's almost midnight there. Thank you very much. Stay fine, stay safe, and have a good night. Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Ahmed, for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.